Hello, everyone. This is Sarah Mack, owner and clinician at Mack's Empowerment Counseling LLC. And today we're going to be doing another requested video by you guys, which is going over inappropriate sexual relationships with a counselor. So sit back, relax, take everything I say with a grain of salt, do your own research, and enjoy the video. All right, so first things first, let's really talk about the inappropriate sexual relationship. So here in Illinois, as well as in all other 50 states, sexual relationships with your therapist is illegal. Though, what we'll do today is we're going to go over the legislation and all that fun stuff, as well as the ACA Code of Ethics, and all those will be linked in the description as well. So that way, you guys will have a clear understanding of why it's legal, how it's legal, and how you can go about reporting a therapist who is having inappropriate relationships with their client. So let's get into it. All right. So I apologize in advance if my picture is cutting off part of the text, but I'll read it to you. All right, here we are. So we are in the ACA Code of Ethics, which are ethics that every counselor has to follow here in the United States. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at A.5.A. Sexual and or romantic relationships prohibited. Sexual and or romantic counselor-client interactions or relationships with current clients, their romantic partners, or their family members are prohibited. This prohibition applies to both in-person and electronic interactions or relationships. All right, so next one, A.5.B. Previous sexual and or romantic relationships, counselors are prohibited from engaging in counseling relationships with persons whom they have had a previous sexual and or romantic relationship. All right, A.5.C. Sexual and or romantic relationships with former clients. Sexual and or romantic counselor-client interactions or relationships with former clients, their romantic partners, or their family members are prohibited for a period of 5 years following the last professional contact. This prohibition applies to both in-person and electronic interactions or relationships. Counselors, before engaging in sexual and or romantic interactions or relationships with former clients, their romantic partners, or their family members, demonstrate forethought and document in written form whether the interaction or relationship can be viewed as exploitative in any way and or whether there is still potential harm the former client in cases of potential exploitation and or harm. The counselor avoids entering into such an interaction or relationship. All right, so that's pretty much it for that, but I will go ahead and read the rest. All right, A.5.D, friends or family members. Counselors are prohibited from engaging in counseling relationships with friends or family members with whom they have had an inability to remain objective, sorry. All right, and then personal virtual relationships with current clients. Counselors are prohibited from engaging in a personal virtual relationship with individuals with whom they have a current counseling relationship, for example, through social and other media. All right, so here we are. So this is the Sexual Exploitation and Psychotherapy Professional Health Services and Personal Mental Health Services Act. So I will bypass all the definitions and we'll get straight into the act itself. All right, so here we go. Section 2.A. A clause of action against a psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional for sexual exploitation exists for a patient or former patient for injury caused by sexual contact with a psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional if the sexual contact occurred 1. During the period the patient was receiving psychotherapy from the psychotherapist or health services from the unlicensed health professional or mental health services from the unlicensed mental health professional, or 2. After the period the patient received psychotherapy from psychotherapists or health services from the unlicensed health professional or mental health services from the unlicensed mental health professional if I, the former patient, was emotionally dependent on the psychotherapist, unlicensed professional, or unlicensed mental health professional, or double I, the sexual contact occurred by means of therapeutic deception. All right, the patient or former patient may recover damages from a psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional who is found liable for sexual exploitation. It is not a defense to the action that sexual contact with the patient occurred outside a therapy or treatment session, or that it occurred off the premises regularly used by the psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional for therapy or treatment sessions. All right, then we got C, whether the Attorney General has probable cause to believe I, that a psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional is having or has had sexual contact with one or more patients or clients, or former patients or former clients, while the psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional was licensed or unlicensed. And double I, that the psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional poses a threat to the health, safety, or welfare of members of the public who are or may be patients or clients of the psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional. The Attorney General may bring an action in the name of the state against the psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or unlicensed mental health professional to restrain by temporary restraining order or preliminary or permanent injunction the psychotherapist, so on and so forth, from providing, offering to provide, or representing himself or herself as being able to provide psychotherapy, health services, or mental health services. At least 5 days prior to the commencement of any action brought under this section, except with a temporary restraining order is sought, the Attorney General shall notify the psychotherapist, so on and so forth, of the Attorney General's intended action and shall give the psychotherapist, so on and so forth, an opportunity to confer with the Attorney General or his or her representative in person or by counsel or other representatives as to the proposed action. The notice shall be given by first-class mail, postage prepaid to the psychotherapist, unlicensed health professional, or licensed mental health professional's usual place of business, or if that person has no usual place of business, to that person's last known address. All right, then D, the action may be brought either in the circuit court of the county in which the conduct complained of occurred, or in circuit court of the county in which the psychotherapist, so on and so forth, resides or has his or her principal place of business. The court may issue temporary restraining orders or preliminary or permanent injunctions and make other orders or judgments it deemed appropriate. Right. E, no injunction shall be issued under this section unless the court finds that the defendant has had an opportunity for an evidentiary hearing as to all contested materials, issues of fact, issues deciding in a prior evidentiary hearing in a court or in an administrative proceeding may be applied to a proceeding under this section in compliance with the Code of Civil Procedure. If court issues an injunction against a psychotherapist, so on and so forth, under this section, the court shall retain jurisdiction of the matter and the cause shall be continued. Any psychotherapist, so on and so forth, who is ordered to refrain from certain conduct or activities in an action brought under this section may petition the court for modification or termination of the injunction up to 10 days notice to the Attorney General. All right, F, any state's attorney or other law enforcement office receiving notice of any alleged violations of the section or violation of any injunction or order issued in an action brought under this section shall immediately forward written notice of the alleged violation together with any information that the state's attorney or other law enforcement office may have to the office of the Attorney General. Right? And G, in an action brought under this section, whenever the court issues a temporary restraining order or preliminary or permanent injunction ordering a defendant to refrain from certain conduct or activities, the order shall contain the following statement. All right, violation of this order is a criminal offense. The clerk shall transmit 2 certified copies of each such order issued under the section to each appropriate law enforcement agency having jurisdiction over locations where the defendant is alleged to have committed the act given rise to the action. The law enforcement agency shall serve 1 copy of the order on the defendant unless otherwise ordered by the court. Service shall be by delivering a copy in hand to the defendant. After any such order has been served on the defendant, any violation of the order by the defendant is a Class 4 felony punishable by a fine of not more than $25,000. Law enforcement agencies shall establish procedures adequate to ensure that all officers responsible for the enforcement of an order entered under this section are informed of the existence and terms of the order. Whenever any law enforcement officer has probable cause to believe that a defendant has violated the provisions of the section, the officer has the authority to arrest the defendant. Whenever the court vacates a temporary restraining order or preliminary or permanent injunction issued under the section, the clerk shall promptly notify in writing each appropriate law enforcement agency that has been notified of the issuance of the order and shall direct each such agency to destroy all records of the vacated order. The law enforcement agency shall comply with that directive. H. Nothing contained in this section shall prohibit the Attorney General in his or her discretion from bringing an action for civil contempt against the defendant rather than bringing criminal charges for an alleged violation of an order issued under this section as provided in subsection G if court finds that a psychotherapist, so on and so forth, is in civil contempt by reason of an alleged violation of an injunction or the order entered under the section, the court shall assess a civil penalty of not more than $10,000 for each such violation found. All right, and then section 3 goes over liability of an employer and scope of discovery and things like that, though you guys can read this portion on your own if you choose to. And then also goes over admission of evidence and things like that. And also, well, let's get into next some things to look up in regards to how often does this happen. Alrighty, so here we have kspope.com and we are taking a look at a study that was done on prior therapist patient sexual involvement amongst patients seen by psychologists. And basically, the abstract notes, a national survey of 1,320 psychologists found that half of the respondents reported assessing or treating at least one patient who has been sexually intimate with a prior therapist. A total of 958 sexual intimacy cases were reported. Most cases involved female patients. Most involved intimacies prior to termination, and most involved harm to the patient. Harm occurred in at least 80% of the instances in which therapists engaged in sex with the patient. After termination, respondents reported that in about 4% of the 1,000 cases in which the issue of sexual intimacies arose, the allegations were false. All right, so now let's take a look at the study. All right, so you guys can read this portion on your own. All right, so sample size. So 1,320 psychologists who met the criteria were randomly selected from the membership directory of the American Psychological Association. The 3 criteria were that members, 1, had earned a doctoral degree in clinical or counseling area, 2, was currently licensed, and 3, appeared according to the listings to be currently providing clinical or counseling services to patients. All right, and then you take a look at the instruments on your own, and then procedure. Each of the 1,320 psychologists was mailed a 1-page cover letter, the 1-page survey form, and a stamped address envelope for returning the form. An effort was made to locate a more recent address when envelopes were returned by the Postal Services as undeliverable. All right, and let's take a look at the results. And then we'll take a look at the table below. So the results show survey forms were returned by 654 of the 1,320 potential respondents, yielding a response rate of 50%. 7 respondents did not fill out the form. Most of them indicated that they had not engaged in clinical or counseling practices. Thus, the final database was provided by 647 respondents. About half of those respondents who had provided clinical or counseling services reported seeing professionally at least one patient who had been sexually intimate with a therapist Respondents reported a total of 958 patients who had engaged in such intimacies. A 2 by 2 by 2 frequency table was formed among patients, gender, whether or not the patient was harmed, and whether sexual intimacies were initiated before or after termination. All first, second, and third order effects were statistically significant using tests of partial association for the two-way analysis. Since the two-way relationships are modified by a three-way effect, only the highest and lowest order effects are interpreted. All right, the three-way association shows that female patients were more likely to experience harm if the intimacy was initiated before termination, which was 95%, than after, which was 80%, while male patients were not more likely to experience harm from intimacies indicated before termination, 80% than after, which was 86%. And then let's take a look at the table. All right, so percentage characteristics. So 5% of the patients was a minor at the time of the intimacies. 3% of the patient married their therapist. 32% of the patients had experienced incest or other child sexual abuse. 10% of the patient had experienced rape prior to intimacies with their therapist. 11% of patients required hospitalizations considering to be at least particularly a result of the intimacies. 14% of the patients attempted suicide. 1% of the patients committed suicide. 17% of the patients achieved complete recovery from any harmful effects of intimacies. 20% of the patients seen pro bono or for reduced fees, and 12% of the patients filed formal complaints of license malpractice. Alrighty, so the rest of that, where it has a discussion and analyzing the data just goes more in depth with it. Though if you guys are looking for the references or want to do more of your own research here are their references at the bottom. So feel free to do more research. But now let's get into, a study done to show what specifically would happen if or how your therapy would be affected if you engage in a sexual relationship or romantic relationship with your client. All right, so let's take a look at that. Alrighty. So this one's a little bit of an old one. I'm not gonna lie to you guys there. But this one's called Sex with Therapy Clients, Its Prevalence, Potential Consequences, and Implications for Psychology Training. So let's just get into the specific ones. I'll link this in the description. Also, if you guys want to read the full text, though, I'll just talk about the portions that more relate to what we're talking about. All right, so the earlier parts talk about how clients are affected if they engage in a sexual relationship with their therapist and how they're affected negatively. But let's more focus on how a therapist would be affected. All right, therapists who become sexually involved with a client are very likely to be impaired in their clinical work because objectively and judgment can be affected once a dual relationship begins. Therapists may be susceptible in ways which affect their professional performance, such as low self-esteem, social isolation from people other than clients and colleagues, and occupational stress. Right? For example, Butler and Zelen interviewed 20 therapists who had sexual contact with a client and found that 90% reported being vulnerable, needy, and or lonely when the contact occurred. It has also been suggested that sexual misconduct may begin with a gradual blurring of treatment boundaries that affect the course of therapy, such as an increase in the frequency and length of after-hours telephone calls, scheduling a favorite client for the last appointment in the day, and inappropriate self-disclosure by the therapist. All right. Moreover, clinical work can be compromised early in the therapeutic relationship. I'm not going to even try to pronounce that name. Found that most therapists' client sexual contact occurred within 3 months of beginning therapy, with a third of the reported cases starting within the first few sessions. All right, so that's some ways that counselors can be affected. And like I said, this also goes over how clients could be negatively affected also. So this is definitely a good read if you guys have time. Again, this will be linked in the description. So now let's talk about what you should do if a therapist is having an inappropriate relationship with a client. All right, so first things first, what you should do when a therapist is having an inappropriate relationship with a client is you should report them. All right, so here in Illinois, we have a few different ones. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. All right, so you have licensed clinical professional counselors, which is what I fall under, licensed clinical social workers, marriage and family therapists, psychologists, CADCs, and psychiatrists. So you should go to their licensed disciplinary board, or you can go to even this website right here, and I'll link this in the description also, and click on file a complaint or call any of those numbers. So if you click on file a complaint, it should take you here, and you just file under professional regulations, right? And go ahead and file a complaint. So when you do that, let's see if it'll take you to that. So it says here, complaints against any individual or entity regulated by the Divisions of Professional Regulation may be filed by contacting the Complaint Intake Unit. For a complete list of professional regulations, please click here. You can click there. And then here you can download the online complaint form, or go to the online complaint form, or download, print out, and fill in, and mail back a regular form, so that we can get that complaint form started. And again, you can go back to the numbers that were listed. Let's see if I can get back to it right here, or any of those if you have any questions or wondering what the process is like. All right, so now let me go into my final thoughts. All right, so here are my final thoughts. So, of course, these type of things do happen. And it's very unfortunate that they do happen. This shouldn't be happening to someone that you are seeking out for help. Though, hopefully with what I talked about here, this can be prevented by showing you guys the actual laws that affect us, as well as where you would go to file complaints if you suspect another therapist is doing that, or if you're a client and you are being exploited by a therapist, so on and so forth. Definitely go ahead and file those complaints, because first things first, safety is the main priority. And unfortunately, these things do happen. Like I've heard continually during my master's degree of stories of therapists that have had this happen to them, where they have taken advantage of clients. And like you saw there, your license will be revoked. You'll be paying at least a $25,000 fine and things like that. So I would say if this is happening to you, definitely report it. All right, other than that, that's about it. Thank you guys very much for watching. So if you are interested in learning more, you can feel free to watch any of my other YouTube videos, or you can go to mackec.com to read any of my blogs. I know I haven't posted any in a while, but that will change soon, because I do have a lot that is coming up. And also, if you are interested in making an appointment, feel free to visit my website, mackec.com, to schedule an appointment. Or if you want me to talk about any other things mental health related, visit mackec.com to submit a request, or you can email me at mackcounselinginfo@mackec.com, or give me a call at 224-407-5019. All right, thank you guys very much, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.